2023 is already halfway over, which means it's time for another biannual book reads tier list. And I've got to say, while I definitely struggled towards the middle of these first 6 months, I was still able to come away with 6 books for y'all, and a pretty healthy mix with 2 fantasies, 2 sci-fis, and 2 horrors, though a lot of them are considered hybrids. But anyways, the 6 books I'll be ranking today are as followed in the order that I read them. Number 1, Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. Number 2, The Shadow Rising, aka Book 4 of the Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. Number 3, The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England, also by Brandon Sanderson. Number 4, Dune by Frank Herbert. Number 5, Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Cesare. And number 6, Jurassic Park: The Lost World by Michael Crichton. I also read 2 novellas by Brandon Sanderson, The Emperor's Soul and Defending Elysium, though as always I won't be including them in this ranking as it's just very hard to compare novellas against full-length works. That said, I do think Emperor's Soul is amongst Sanderson's best written works. The prose, the story, everything just felt a little bit more elevated for him, so I really appreciated that one and I would highly recommend it. I'll be talking very light spoilers for these books today, keeping them strictly to the book's premise or what's written on the back cover. But anyways, enough chit chat, let's get started with the bottom. And unfortunately, the lone book in my 2023 C tier as of right now is Brandon Sanderson's Secret Project number 2, The Frugal Wizard's Handbook.
Whoa, that seems a little harsh.
Of all the books I've read from Sanderson, this is definitely my least favorite from him, which is a real shame because it was my most anticipated from the 4 secret projects announced last year for his Kickstarter. I've reviewed almost every book I've read from him except for the first 3 Stormlight Archive novels, I think, and as of right now, this one has my lowest given score.
That sucks, man. Yep.
Now, it's a fun rendition of multiversal travel with some familiar elements in there that are inspired by The Bourne Identity, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and even a little Rick and Morty and Indiana Jones. And while on paper that sounds like an absolute blast, and thus why it was my most anticipated secret project despite it being the one non-Cosmere book, the execution was just not as satisfying as I hoped it would be, and it just felt like the story could have used another polish or even another draft. There are ideas here that work really well, like the White Room amnesia trope, multiversal travel, and the minimal use of medieval magic, and the main character is unique and has some fun quirks, but in all honesty, I found myself more interested in and rooting more for one of the major side characters, which I don't think was intended. And besides that, the overall story just fell flat for me, and the world building left a lot to be desired. Again, I really think this could have been something special if Brandon had taken the time to try another pass at it, but I understand his self-imposed deadlines. They are the reason that he's one of the most prolific authors today, while still succeeding in terms of overall quality. If you want to hear my full spoiler-free thoughts on the novel, you can click the link at the top of the screen or in the description below, but as for now, let's move on to the B tier. And the sole book occupying the B tier so far is a fun little YA horror, Clown in a Cornfield. This one definitely has a lot going for it, with complex teenage characters, some gnarly horror imagery, and a fast-paced and interesting story structure. But there's also quite a few components that I am rather mixed on, and I think a lot of others will be too. It does feel very YA, and it reads very much like a PG-13 horror flick, which is probably why it sold film adaptation rights so quickly, but I must warn you that it is filled with vulgar swearing and mature themes and topics, one of which is recent politics. Now, no matter what side of the political aisle you fall on, I can see this book bugging you and just not sitting right at times because of the very blatant, in-your-face, forced political themes, and in all honesty, I feel like at times the author forgot where even he aligned. Maybe that's just the nature of it feeling forced to me, or maybe it's not articulated as well as he thought it was, or maybe I'm just an idiot, all are equally likely. But anyways, it's certainly one aspect of this book that made me roll my eyes and think, really? Did this need to be here? I picked up this book for thrilling escapism, not a brutal reminder of reality. But again, aside from all that, this book really is a quick and fun read. I've already picked up the sequel and plan on reading that for this spooky season, and from what I hear, this is a planned trilogy, so I'm just hoping the fun thrills continue and the politics can fade out at least a little. But moving on to the A tier, which is the most filled tier as of now, and it usually is because I chase after books that I think I'll like and usually go in with positive intent. But anyways, starting it off, I have Frank Herbert's Dune. I was not looking forward to this one.
What? Are you joking?
But I felt like I needed to read it in order to fully appreciate the recent film adaptation and upcoming second part, as well as just sci-fi in general. But so many people had put me off on Herbert's jarring writing style of jumping between POVs so abruptly, and I'd heard some people found the story dull and too slow, but my god, I was honestly blown away with this one. The way Herbert weaves jaw-dropping revelations within his political story as he slowly expands upon the world of Arrakis and its Fremen culture, it's also captivating. It feels like you're on another world yourself. Paul Atreides is a great protagonist, and his journey throughout this book, seeing him become his own man to avenge his father, it's just so awesome. Now, that said, the other characters were very hit or miss for me. This is equally Jessica's story, Paul's mother, and if she isn't someone you can relate to or sympathize with, well, then I can definitely see how this story might seem dull to you. Honestly, for me, the writing style was the dullest part of this book. Similar to the Greenbone saga, I found it to be very simple, very blunt, and matter-of-factly. Herbert is just telling the story, but he does weave in some nice poetic pieces from time to time. There will be lines that just sink into your heart and stay with you, but the rest sounds very much like, Paul did this, he thought this, uh-oh, his prescience, his terrible purpose. And as for the action, I also thought that was a lacking component. It definitely blows up towards the end, but the writing behind it never really feels all that dynamic. I'll be putting out a 2-minute book review for this one ahead of the film adaptation's second part, so be on the lookout for that to get the rest of my thoughts. But as for now, let's move on to the next one on this list, The Shadow Rising. Now, this one took me 2.5 months to read, which for me is quite a long time. And yes, it's a hefty boy, being almost 400,000 words, but I've read bigger books in a fraction of that time. I finished this one in late April, and I've been thinking about it ever since. It's a slow burn, but the burn has left its mark on me, and I think it's here to stay.
Wow, that's deep. Really deep.
I've heard so many people say that this is their favorite book in the Wheel of Time series, and so I definitely went in with higher expectations than what I had for the first 3 books. However, I'm not sure if I see that big of a difference, at least in terms of the overall payoff, because again, it's a slow trek to the big epic moments. In terms of story, it struggles from similar things that the first ones did, although on a smaller scale, and in terms of pacing, I honestly found it quite atrocious. And I still do not think, after a single reading, that this story warranted a 400,000 word book. Now that said, over the last couple months, it has grown on me, a remarking amount to be honest, and I wouldn't be surprised if on a reread years and years from now, if I was excited for a long story here, because it would mean more time I get to spend with these characters, and I feel like these characters all really start to blossom within this one. Rand and his revelations with the Aiel, Matt starting to come into his own, as well as Egwene and Elaine, and Perrin, Perrin. Perrin really became a standout character in the last book, The Dragon Reborn, but his arc continues here and warps into something truly epic. Again, it's still a slow burn, and I'm still not entirely convinced that his arc specifically needed as much time as it got, but man, was it effective, and did it excite me for what's to come next. I'm working on a full-length review for this one as well, which should come out later this month, but in the meantime, I'll just say that this was a tough but worthwhile read, and I'm just hoping that the story continues to evolve in new and unique ways that are as epic as some of the things within this one. But topping off the A tier for today, I have Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park sequel, The Lost World. Now, this one too took me some time to get through. I actually started it last year, but quickly took a break and moved on to other things. And after reading the other 5 on this list, I wanted something simple that I didn't really care all that much for. So I picked this one back up and read it cover to cover within a couple weeks. This one was a riveting read. It had me on the edge of my seat and flying through the pages, just needing to know what happens next, as well as what certain revelations were that Dr. Ian Malcolm teases time and time again before being rudely interrupted. While it might not maintain the same level of magic for me that the first book created, it's still a solid continuation of the story, filled with new interesting characters, non-stop action, and thrilling lessons on archaeology, mathematics, philosophy, and engineering. And something that really fascinated me with this one is that Crichton toys around with the idea that perhaps the dinosaurs didn't go extinct the same way many of us have been told.
Well, how about that?
And this book gets to the heart of that topic and how maybe extinction is induced by behavior and not falling space rocks or erupting volcanoes. Now, I think the characters are probably the weakest component of these books, and this one replaces all the ones that we got to know in the first one, save for Malcolm, but personally, I didn't mind that as Malcolm was my favorite in the first, but that's just something to know before going in. That said, some new characters like Jack Thorne were really fun additions. For me, The Lost World is one of the weakest films in the franchise, but this book is almost entirely different, with a lot of things playing out differently and better, and coupled with really interesting topics. Crichton is a master at educating you while he entertains you. So if you're hesitant to pick this one up based off the film, I say go for it. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. But moving on to the last book on this list today, and the sole book in the S tier, I have Tress of the Emerald Sea, aka Secret Project Number 1 by Brandon Sanderson. This book was absolutely enchanting. It's a 100,000 word Hoid story where Hoid is a main character as well as the narrator, where he has limited agency on the story's events and makes it easy to have a grand old time. If you're not familiar with Brandon Sanderson or his expanding universe of the Cosmere, Hoid is basically the Nick Fury of the bunch, a world hopper who appears in all the major books. However, his demeanor is far different from Fury's. He brings a good amount of levity to every scene he's in, and he has some delightful and fun roles. He's a hit for anyone who reads these books. And he's also a fantastic storyteller, in large part thanks to Sanderson, with a very fun narration style and sense of humor, but he's also great at delivering heart-melting emotional scenes, making it easy to walk away with a lesson learned and a smile on your face. And in all honesty, Tress of the Emerald Sea might just be my new favorite Hoid story, and certainly my favorite standalone book within the Cosmere so far. The world and its unique, colorful magic system, Tress and the friends she makes along her journey, the twists and turns and every reference to the greater Cosmere, all these things and more contribute to this book's wonderful journey. It's a fantastic and magical experience, and I hope everyone who hears about it decides to give it a chance, because it's truly worth it. If you're curious and want to know more, you can check out my full review using the links provided. It's short and succinct and will hopefully help you decide if the Cosmere is something that you'd enjoy. But that's it for my ranking today. If you enjoyed this shorter video, let me know by hitting that like button and telling me what your favorite reads of the year have been so far down in the comments below. I always love to hear what others are enjoying, even if it does result in new additions to my never-ending, ever-expanding TBR. But as for now, that's it from me. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I will see you all next time.